Good morning and welcome back. Church bells on one side, electrical saw on the other. Here we are. I can hear something kind of frigging around. Oh, someone's on the roof. I was like, what is that? Nothing really to say this morning, other than to just join you here and now. Just be together, I guess. Leaves falling, wind blowing, hammer knocking. Life is a strange phenomenon. It's a strange thing, isn't it? We're born, and everyone, as they grow, feels like they know what's right and how to live life, and people push those beliefs on other people. And at some point, it creates these differences between you and I. What you believe becomes a barrier to whether or not I can be your friend, vice versa. We all seem to be very different. And a lot of times people, when you say everyone's the same, people will be, no. They'll say, no, we're not. We're not the same at all. People are not the same at all. So people tend to focus more on, from my experience, the people that I've met, our differences, rather than to see our similarities. And there are many. This is not a video on similarities. If you are honest to yourself for a minute, you could find a plethora of things that make us all the same. At the same time, we're all unique. Not one person comparable to another, so everyone has different traits and characteristics. But it's what you focus on that becomes the louder voice in your life. It's what you focus on that becomes the predominant expression inside of your mind, what screams loudest in your mind. Whatever you focus on gets this sense of isness, as realness, if you will, becomes more real. And as a human, we're very focused in our perception, so we can't really see more than one side at a time. So in order to see things as they are, you need to really broaden your perspective and get as many angles on any one thing, specific thing that you're thinking of, talking about, focusing on, so that you build a bigger picture. Separation comes from a narrow point of view and not willing to expand your sphere of perception. Ignorance. In my experience, the more that I've expanded my sphere of perception on many different aspects, eventually you come to a certain, or I have at least come to a certain realization of oneness. You hear this often in spirituality, of oneness. What I mean when I say oneness is that you see that everything ultimately is part of the same thing. You come to a point where you realize, and you come to the point that you realize we're all basically the same. And oftentimes when people get to this certain depth they'll say, well, we're all this, we're all that. A person can say, we're all made up of atoms. And then when somebody says, we're all human, a person might say, well, deeper than that, we're all atoms. And even this kind of point where you realize your oneness from can become a place where you argue from and again further separate. So the idea, all these, where you gain your perception of oneness from is not the ultimate. We need to understand that it's not the point to get to a point where you realize your oneness so that you can tell everyone this is the ultimate point where oneness is, but instead where you find your oneness, then you can let go of what it is, where it is you found it, and then you can live in that oneness. What comes from the realization of oneness is more important than what we are all one from. Does that make sense? You don't want to be fighting with everyone. Once you realize the oneness, then you can live in that energy, in that field of oneness, in the understanding that we're all the same on some level. What level? It doesn't matter. Do you see? So once you realize that on some level, whatever level that you've had your realization of oneness from, once you've realized that inside yourself, it's to nourish it and allow it to be with each interaction with everyone. And at first it's difficult. For me, it's still a process that's, the mind jumps in for a second and then, oh yeah. Just like, how can I say this? Just like when you have a habit of putting glasses on maybe and you forget you don't need them, so you take them off. The mind has a habit. It might not be a good example there, but the mind has this habit of looking at things in its old patterns. So in myself, sometimes my mind will, for a very quick moment, look through its old filter, and then I have this, because I carry the feeling with me, the feeling will quickly remind me that, oh yeah, wait a minute, I can lift those blinders and then see the world through the oneness. There's this process where my mind is still retraining it, recognizing the old pattern and then dropping the old pattern, not allowing myself to vibe with the energy of the old pattern. It's when I recognize that vibe, the mind is there, but the vibe doesn't match. It's like, wait a minute. So I can drop that thought, which at one time would have made me hold on to and fight from. So when you've realized your oneness with everything, vibe with that and allow the natural process of the mind still going to do its thing. Just allow that process to unfold. And I've had many realizations when I can be in that state of oneness. And saying being in that state of oneness is really not at all, language is very difficult because it doesn't get across what I feel when I say being in that state of oneness. It's not like I'm going to be one with everything. Oh, not at all. It comes from a deep realization that hits you like a ton of bricks that, wow, we're all the same fundamentally. We're all... And then it changes you. It transforms your entire being. It's not a choice you make. You become it. So that's what I mean. So when you interact with people, that is your new default. And once in a while, your mind will come in and try to hijack you and remind you of old patterns instead of living in those old patterns. And every once in a while, your mind reminding you that we're all the same. See, it's not a mind structure that you're trying to develop that you live through, but instead it's a state of being from a deep realization, and then your mind tries to pull you back into a lower state of vibration. So again, once you've realized that state of oneness, when you interact with people, you can forgive. And you get so many different realizations from that state of oneness. It's as though you become open to these different perspectives that you never would have allowed into you because you were closed off before. You begin to expand. That's how it was in my experience. Every single day, you just continually expand. And that expansion brings deeper wisdom, more compassion, and ultimately deeper and deeper sense of freedom. And when you realize this, you see that this freedom is from yourself. You see ultimately, like I have in my life, that everything you see wrong in another person is actually you. It's not that you see something, it's not that you're wrong, but it's that you realize the mind itself is structured to see wrong in others, and that structure is in you. So you stop putting the focus on other people, and you remember to turn in. Oh, it's me, you say. Wow. And then you can take responsibility, because you can't force another person to change. There's too many variables around you. You can't change everything externally. But when the responsibility falls inside within you, you can do something there. And at one point, you realize you don't need to do anything, and then the ultimate freedom dawns upon you. And that sensation, that experience, goes beyond anything I can tell you in a video. The feeling of freedom that you don't realize is available to you is truly transformational. That word doesn't even come close to explaining how amazing, how powerful of an experience realizing your own freedom from yourself can be. It's equal to having God drop down in front of you. If you believe in God, for example, you could imagine God jumping down in front of you and just hugging you and holding you in the most amount of love you could ever possibly imagine feeling, complete acceptance. Then it's that same thing, but you realize it came from you. So instead of getting it from God, you realize it's yours and has been yours to begin with. And then you become extremely, extremely, extremely empowered, because you realize this is something that you can bring forth, manifest into this life. That this is the point of living, to be free from yourself. And I mean, those are just a few of the things that I've experienced for myself that have been the most profound. And all of this comes from in the state of oneness, realizing it, experiencing that, and being open. Basically learning to drop the ego is what it comes down to. Learning to recognize your ego, seeing the value, and not only seeing the value, really deeply understanding the value of dropping the ego. Seeing how it hurts you, you recognize its value. Seeing how you hurt others when the ego is running the ship, running the show. I haven't put a lot of effort into learning things of the occult and in the informational sense of things. I've seen early on my path that learning about any one thing is not going to give me what it is that I'm looking for. Ultimately, we're all looking to experience that state of happiness and peace and joy, regardless what it is that we're doing. And I don't talk a lot about these types of things, the occult, and I don't give a lot of information in these videos because I've seen for myself that giving information about something is not going to help. What I'm trying to do in these videos is share my experiences to hopefully encourage you to look inside yourself, to see that someone has found something, that I have found something that most people are looking for, and that I found it without information, just by looking inside myself. Sure, I've read all these books. Sure, I've read countless teachings and heard countless teachings. But each of them, as I'm listening, I've seen that it's not what they're saying. It's not the point of remembering what they're saying so I can regurgitate it. But it's these words sometimes that they speak become a signpost. You recognize through an experience that you have by looking in yourself what they just said. You experience it. You're like, you can say, you see to yourself, it's an experience of, wow, not only do I believe what they say, but this belief now, which is truth and trust, because you've seen it yourself. It's extremely important not to rely on information, but to test that information, any information you get. If you're listening to teachings, go inward, test these things for yourself and see, are they true for you? Because it's the experience itself that you go through that will change you, transform you. Not the words in form of memory attached by a belief or with a belief behind the memory. Because that does nothing other than give you something to argue about, something to prove to others. When you've experienced it yourself, there's nothing to prove. You become the proof. So, I'll leave you with that. Wherever you are around the world, whatever time it is that you're watching this video, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Peace.